Today we are talking about anger, and I want to share with you guys something that happened to me recently. I found myself in this place of anger that I have not been in a very, very long time. And I'm not talking about that kind of anger like when you break a nail and you're on your way to a party or someone has insulted something you're wearing. I'm talking about that deep down level of anger when you get really, really bad news or someone does something really horrible or maybe somebody crashes into your brand new car. Those things that just take you to an entirely new level. And the interesting thing is that the incident that kind of sparked this experience was just so beyond my mental grasp of understanding people's behavior. And it honestly started with this feeling of complete disbelief for what had happened. And then it quickly turned into this overwhelming level of sadness and hurt. And before I could even process that, it morphed into this level of anger that I could physically feel traveling through my body. I could just feel this anger building and building and building. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this? And I was just in my mind trying to think of the fastest way that I could just kind of break that space that I was in. Well, I finally got myself nice and calmed down, and I was able to move beyond what I was experiencing. And a couple of hours later, not a couple of minutes later, but a couple of hours later, I was thinking to myself, I'm sure that I am not the only one who has these experiences, especially in the world that we are currently living in. And I know that we are living in a world where everybody pretends that everybody's life is so perfect, but it's just not possible to live in that level of perfection because we all know, especially those of you who listen to my podcast, perfection does not exist. So I thought, maybe there's other people out there that have had that same experience as what I just experienced. And I'm going to do a little research and I'm going to see if there are different ways that maybe we can get that level of anger down. What are some tips or tricks that we can use to just pull you out of that anger level even quicker than the time it took me to do it? Okay, so I go on this Google search and I have to be very honest with you guys. 90% of the things that I was finding were things like do a yoga pose, do some breathing, grab your gratitude journal. I have to be very honest with you. Unless I was going to take that gratitude journal, set it on fire, and throw it across the room, that was not going to be helping me in that moment. And I'm just being honest here. So I'm continuing this search because I'm thinking to myself, okay, there has to be better advice when you're in this blinding anger that you're just trying to get yourself calm and seeing things clearly. There has to be better advice out there than just breathe and do a yoga pose and read a gratitude journal, which are all things, don't get me wrong, that I believe in. But in that moment, they just were not enough. So I came across this list of 10 things that I just felt were so valuable and I wanted to share them with you. And I actually found these on this Mental Health America website, which is mhanational.org. And the article that I'm going to be pulling this from was called 10 Healthy Ways to Release Rage. So let's just jump right in because I just loved this and it was so helpful for me. So number one immediately caught my attention. It was to throw or break something safely. Now, I want to emphasize the word safely. I also want to mention that if you're going to throw or break something, be very particular about the thing you're choosing, because you don't want to grab or break something that then when you come back down to your level of calmness, you're going to be devastated that you broke something that was very important to you, right? It was very interesting because physically, it's just that act of just that throwing something, just breaking something. And again, I want to add safely, but it just can really help to relieve some of that stress, right? Because that's really what it's all about, is that stress just building up in the body and it feels like it has no place to go. So, I always joke around about like punching a punching bag, right? Like sometimes you just need something to physically move that energy and get it out of your body. Maybe just stepping outside into your yard and just know you can throw a couple of rocks safely into a pile, or just something to get that movement of just physically releasing that anger. I personally thought number 1 was hilarious. Number 2, I have to tell you again, I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but we're keeping it real here on Psychically Speaking with Lisa Ann. So number 2 was to scream in private. Okay. So just like number 1, the key word was safely. Number 2, the key word is in private. Now, I have to tell you, 10 years ago, actually, it was, oh my God, it was way longer than that now that I'm thinking about it. Probably 20 something years ago. When I was going through my divorce, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got right as I started my divorce, I met this woman who was a little bit further in her divorce journey than I was. And I'll never forget, she said to me, one day you're going to get to that breaking point. And she said to me, I'm going to tell you what works for me. I just get in my car. I drive down the road in the middle of nowhere. I roll down my windows and I just let out this scream. And I have to tell you, I remember so vividly the day that she told me about it. I thought, oh my God, this woman is crazy. But lo and behold, one day I hit that breaking point and I instantly remembered the advice she gave me. And I got in my car and I drove down the road, down a quiet little street, and I rolled down the windows and I just screamed and let it all out. And when I tell you, I just felt all the tension in my body, all that anger and anxiety just instantly left. It was so amazing. And again, it works fabulously. Sometimes you just need to get rid of that energy that's just boiling inside of you. Now, you can also scream into a pillow or take that short drive to go someplace like I did, or maybe go on a hike somewhere where you're up on the top of a mountain where nobody else is. And again, just releasing that anger in a positive way. Again, remember the word private, right? We don't want you screaming in an apartment where now all of a sudden people are calling 911, right? So again, use these tips wisely, okay? We don't want them causing more anger. So number 3 was to sing it out. Now, they call it angry singing. And I started laughing when I read that because, again, I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but when I read about angry singing, that took me right back to some of those bad relationships and breakups that I've had. And I was laughing to myself because it's so funny how when you're in this good relationship, right, that song comes on and you're like, oh, this is our song and it's so lovely. And it just gives you, that feeling of bunnies and warm blankets. And then that same song comes on after you broke up and you're just like angrily singing the words with the tears dripping down your face, right? So I was laughing when I read that because I thought, oh boy, does that take me back to some moments. But again, it's so cleansing, right? So it's really good to, maybe even change the music, right? So put on something that's more that hard rock, loud kind of, drums blaring and that, just to help you to channel and express those feelings, get them out in a good way. And again, I say in a healthy way. Now, number 4 was dance it out. Okay. And again, that physical movement is so important. And number 5 was similar with the physically getting it out, because it was to do a tough workout. Maybe go for a quick run or hike up a mountain. So you see the theme here about physically releasing it, right? So we're always talking about energy, and that's what this is really talking about, because that anger is kind of like that stuck energy, right? It's just bouncing through your body and you just feel it and you're just like, you can't get rid of it. So these are such great tips to help you to shift, release, and move that energy. Now, number 6 was journaling. Now, this is very interesting because it talked about how sometimes just putting your feelings into words and writing it down, how that's not always easy. So this technique might not be for everyone. But I have this exercise that I always tell people about when they have things that they can't let go of. And that is my letter writing exercise, right? So I've gone into this in depth in the past, but I do want to mention it again here because I really think it is one of the most powerful tools that we can have in our toolbox. So when I tell people about the letter writing exercise, there's a couple of really key things to this, because people always say to me, oh yeah, no, I know all about the letter writing exercise. But then when I tell them the way that I do it, they go, oh no, I never heard about that. So here's my 3 keys. Number 1, you need to physically write it with a pen, pencil, marker. You can't type it into your computer. There's a lot of science behind that, but I'm telling you, it's a lot more impactful if you're writing it by hand as opposed to typing it on your computer. Number 2, equally important. When you write it, you're basically taking that energy from you and you're putting it onto that paper. So you're getting that energy or that thing that you can't let go of out of your body and you're putting it on the paper. The second part of that is you have to read it back to yourself. But here's the thing, you have to read it back to yourself out loud, not just in your head. All right. And again, it doesn't have the same impact if you're writing it and reading it to yourself. When you say it out loud, there's something really powerful about that. You're basically saying to yourself, you know what? I hear you. I'm honoring those feelings that you're having. And then this is the most important part. After you've written it down on a piece of paper, after you've read it back to yourself out loud, you need to set it on fire safely and burn it. You are never, ever, ever, ever going to send it to the person that you're writing about, and you are not going to keep that negative energy that you have vomited all over that piece of paper in a journal or in your nightstand or next to your bed or in your office. You are not going to keep it. We don't want that negative energy around us. You want to set it on fire and burn it, because there is something very important about seeing it disappearing right in front of your eyes. Fire being such a cleansing element and just getting rid of all those emotions once and for all. So, I do think the journaling can be very important, but rather than the journaling, I'm going to suggest the letter writing exercise. Number 7 was to draw or paint. And I thought this was really great too, because it's such a powerful way to take those feelings and emotions and turn them into something positive. It's interesting because when I read this, I had this vision of getting one of those big canvases and going and getting one of those big sea sponges and just ripping it into several different pieces, dipping it into different colored paints, and just throwing it at that canvas, right? Just put the canvas on the ground and just throw that sea sponge in all those different colors and just keep throwing it at the canvas. And I thought, oh, how like cleansing and releasing would that be? And I have to tell you, even as I'm talking about this, I really think I'm going to make a trip to the local craft store. And I think I'm going to just grab myself a canvas and some sea sponges just to have, just for next time I find myself in that place where I need to release a little or I need to vent a little bit. Who knows? Maybe after I retire from my psychic work, maybe I'll become an artist and my tagline will be the angry artist. Who knows? Always looking ahead. Now, it was very interesting because as I was thinking about the canvas and the painting and thinking about the colors, right? Even just sometimes the colors that we use, I thought just stepping into your creativity is also so important, right? Because it's those moments of just kind of really distracting the mind, I think is what's the most important, right? So by doing that, stepping out and doing that drawing or doing that painting, you're really just shifting your focus. You're really just shifting where your mind, that mind loop that we talk about all the time, that sometimes we just get so stuck in. Now, number 8 was to change your surroundings. And I think that's a really big one, especially sometimes when we're in that moment where we're really angry and maybe there's people around or there's things that are going on. Sometimes you just need to step away from the environment that you're in. Step outside. Anything that's actually going to disrupt the mind, again, is going to be very beneficial for you. Now, number 9 was very interesting. Number 9 was to destroy a physical representation of your anger. Okay. Now, again, I feel like I want to add a little note to this. Make sure the thing that you're destroying is not going to be something that you're going to regret destroying later, right? So let's not destroy the only photograph of someone that you've been friends with for 9 million years because you're having a bad moment, right? But I did think about, maybe something happened, or let's say someone emails you something that gets you really upset. Imagine just printing that out and then ripping that email to shreds, or running it through the shredder, or maybe finding a picture of something that represents that thing that's causing the anger and making a funny face on it, right? Or ripping that up. I just think, again, that can be very, very cleansing. And number 10 was verbalizing your anger. And I will tell you, this is one of the things that I did to really help bring my anger level down, because sometimes we just need to vent to someone. But you want to be really particular about who you're choosing to vent to. It's really important that you choose someone who's going to listen and who's going to help you to see things more clearly. You don't want someone who's going to feed into that anger. I remember years ago, getting back to my fabulous dating life, I remember years ago, when you would just be getting out of a bad relationship, or, you call your friend and you're like, oh my God, you can't believe what happened. And that well-meaning friend would go, oh, well, you already know he's an idiot. Remember what he did 6 weeks ago and 8 weeks ago? And you're sitting there thinking, no, I kind of forgot about all that, but thanks for bringing it up, because now I'm even more angry. Right? So when you're in that moment of anger, you want to pick the right person. You want someone who is going to be the good listener, who's going to be there, and who's going to ask you, what can I do for you? And if you're the person on the other side of that, so maybe you're the person who the angry person is calling, keep all of this in mind, because remember, they're not calling looking for you to fix it, right? They just want to vent. And I think it's really important to let that person know that it's okay that they feel angry and that they have the right to feel their emotions. So if you're the angry person, be very particular about who you're calling. And if you're the person who the angry person is calling, remember, they're not expecting you to fix it. Just listen and be there for them. So let's do a quick review of the 10 healthy ways to release our anger. So 1 was throw or break something safely. Let's not forget the safely part. 2 was to scream in private, no 911 calls, please. 3 was to sing it out. 4 was to dance it out. 5 was to do a tough workout. 6 was to journal, but remember we added our writing exercise to that. 7 was to draw or paint, and you'll all be laughing a few years down the road when I become the angry artist. 8 was change your surroundings. 9 was destroy a physical representation of your anger. Remember, don't destroy anything you may regret later on. And 10 was to verbalize your anger with that important note to be picky about who you are choosing. Now, as we wrap this up, a funny thing that happened is after this whole experience that I had, I was listening to something the other day and they were talking about distracting your mind. They were actually talking about dealing with like anxiety. And they were talking about how when you start to get into what I call those mind loops, right? Where you're having that thought of anxiety and now your brain loves to add all these other things in there for you to worry about. They were talking about how that's coming from the back of the brain and how if you just start like writing down your feelings or what you're worried about, it actually distracts the brain because once you start writing, you're now shifting using the front of your brain. And just that simple act of shifting what part of the brain you're using causes an interruption in a good way. So keep that in mind because that's really what you want to do when you're in that place of that anger. You just want to take a pause and you want to interrupt that anger pattern. And now you have 10 great ways to do that. I really want to thank you for joining me today. I hope you found some of these tips helpful. And you know, I am all about keeping it real on this podcast. And we all know life is not always easy. So I hope that you find these tips helpful. I hope you pass them along, share them with those that you love, and really add them to your toolbox. Welcome, fantabulous souls, to Psychically Speaking. I'm Psychic Lisa Ann, your host on this transformative journey of body, mind, and spirit. Join me, a psychic medium and healer, as we explore the wonders of life, share experiences, and grow together. Whether you're new to spirituality, an old soul, an empath, or a seasoned professional, this podcast has something special just for you. So let's dive in and embark on a journey of learning, healing, and personal growth together. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey. If you enjoyed the podcast, please share it with a friend and hit subscribe. For more about my free live weekly happy hour via Zoom, my work, or visiting my Body, Mind, Spirit spa and gift shop in historic downtown Southern Pines, North Carolina, visit spiritquestnc.com. Remember, life isn't always rainbows and butterflies. But each and every day, you have the power to be fantabulous. Embrace that power. Let your inner light shine. Until next time, stay empowered and keep embracing life's magic.